Hello everybody, it's Foo here, and today I've got a video for you all about the Pokemon Palossand that was reintroduced in the Isle of Armor DLC, and it's kitted out with a new move in Scorching Sands, a really cool ground type move, kind of like Scald. It's a special move that has a 30% chance to burn, which is very good for bulky walls because obviously it helps them take on physical attackers really well. It's also interesting because it's got some random distribution, some other fire types get it. So Arcanine's a notable example that didn't have special ground type coverage before, so now it gets that and it can try and burn things at the same time. But I do think that Palossand's a great user for it because it's a bulky Pokemon, it's a special attacker, and it has recovery. So I've got some battles today to demonstrate how Scorching Sand is so good for Palossand, letting it take on things that it could never dream of taking on before. And that's really, really cool. And then I've also got a very fun doubles gimmicky strategy at the end, which I can't wait to show you because it's really fun and really, really cool to use. And actually super viable too. I've built a team that you guys can try out, so stay tuned for that. But first, we've got some singles battles showing off how good Scorching Sand is for Palossand. And in this first one, we're going up against an opponent that's leading with an Azumarill. I actually led off with my Elder Barge, the Rillaboom, because it's Choice Scarf with U-turn, so it's quite a good scout Pokemon, and I knew that they did have an Azumarill, so I didn't really want to lead with Palossand because that's not a great matchup. So what this allows me to do is just click U-turn. They're probably going to switch, and I can see what their answer to Rillaboom is. It's going to be a Goodra, which either resists or more likely it has the Sap Sipper ability, which would allow it to eat up that grass type attack and get an attack boost at the same time. I get a crit on the U-turn, which, I mean, that's pretty helpful because it did a sizable chunk to the Goodra. It's probably got a very good special defense. Maybe it's Assault Vest. But I'm going to go into my Dragon type Dragapult to threaten it out, and I'm actually going to click Shadow Ball, which really wouldn't have done much damage to Goodra, but I did anticipate a switch. I thought maybe they'd go into Azumarill to be immune to the Dragon type move, but they go into Bishop, which is a huge threat to my team. Like, I have really nothing to take it on very well, and if it goes for a Sword Stance, I would have been in a big pile of trouble. So I decide to go for a Flamethrower, but unfortunately my opponent does just go straight for the Sucker Punch, and that takes out my Dragapult. Not ideal, but it allows me to get into the Man of the Hour, the pile of sand itself, Palossand. Mine is called Citadel, and it's shiny because I've transferred it over from my shiny hunted little Sandy Gast in Pokemon Sun and Moon, and it's able to tank a Throat Chop because it's max defense and it's got really good defensive stats. I can go for a Scorching Sand, which doesn't take it out, but it does get the burn on Bishop, which is absolutely amazing. Unfortunately, grassy terrain means I'm not really getting any residual damage on the Bishop at the moment, but I have reduced its attack, which means that I can just take another Throat Chop this following turn and go for a Shore Up, which is Palossand's signature recovery move. Amazing. Really nice for ground types to have recovery moves. You see Hippowdon as well having Slack Off, and immediately that's super viable too. So I really like ground types with recovery. I think they're very, very good. So Palossand, yeah, just very, very bulky, able to go for the Scorching Sand and get that burn on the Bishop. And it means that this ghost type is able to take on a very powerful dark type, which is cool. At the moment, I'm just going for some shore ups because I'm concerned that the opponent might switch out and I want to be a really good amount of HP. And also, if the Bishop decides to go for a Sword Stance, again, I just need to be at higher HP so that I can then take +2 hits. But because the grassy terrain has worn off, it means that I can now just go for another shore up one more time to make sure that I'm at max HP when the Bishop goes down. I know that the Pokemon in the back are Azumarill and Goodra, and to take either of them on, I need to be at a good amount of HP. So anyway, I get to full HP as the Bishop goes down, and that was really cool to see Palossand just tanking hits from a Bishop. That's not something you see very often. Now the Azumarill comes in, which is a very scary threat. I'm just going to go for the Scorching Sands, and they have the cheek to set up a belly drum in front of me. So I'm really hoping that I get this burn right here because that would definitely be very nice. And fortunately, I do get a burn, but unfortunately they had the Lumberry, so that's not going to work out too well for me. And they're going to go for an Aqua Jet. However, I have got the Paso Berry, so it's like activating trap cards all over the place. They go for the Aquajet. I am able to take a +6 Aquajet from an Azumarill, get my water compaction ability, go for another Scorching Sands, and that is enough to take out this Pokemon. So that was just so cool to see Palossand take on a Bisharp and an Azumarill, and you really get to see Scorching Sand put in work at the same time. So I thought that was definitely worth showing you guys. Because of the water compaction, that's actually really helpful too, because when the Goodra attacks me, if it's a physical attacker, it probably won't be able to take me out. I'm max physical defense, max physical bulk, and now I've got +2 defense. And so there's a good chance that if it's a physical Goodra, it wouldn't be able to take me out. So if it can take me out, it's likely a special Goodra, and that's really good information for me going into my last Pokemon. And it does actually take me out, so it's probably a special Goodra. Now, I've only got my Rillaboom left, and you saw that Goodra was actually their switch into Rillaboom, which is slightly concerning. So they've probably got Sap Sipper. It means I can't go for my stab attacks while they're going for their stab dragon type attacks. Max Wormwind can reduce my attack stat, which isn't great. So I'm going to have to... Look at my Mohican Wobble. How obscene is that? And I kind of love it, but at the same time, just obscene. So massive Elder Barge here. We're going to go for the Max Flutterby. You saw that I had the U-turn earlier. What Max Flutterby allows me to do is it means I'm not falling into the trap of their Sap Sipper, and it also means that I can reduce Goodra's special attack, presuming that it's a special attacker, and that means that any incoming attacks will do a lot less damage, and that will hopefully allow me to stall out 2 turns of their Dynamax, so that then I have the Dynamax advantage. They actually opt to go for Max Ooze, which isn't a very powerful max attack, but it does mean that they get a special attack boost. Although after the Flutterby, it just means that they're back at neutral attack. Maybe an option for them would have been to go for a Max Wormwind, because that would have meant that my following attacks wouldn't do as much, but they're on more of a timer for getting damage on me because they're about to run out of Dynamax. So I go for another Max Flutterby as they go for a Max Flare here, and that does quite a bit more damage than Max Ooze. I think 2 of those still wouldn't quite have taken out my Rillaboom, and so I was probably in a winning position anyway. Oh, and also, in terms of not having a Gigantamax Rillaboom, I think Gigantamax Rillaboom is better. Like, its max move is base 160 power, so it's really, really strong. But also having terrain control is important. Plus, this is a choice scarfer anyway, so I don't usually Dynamax it, but that's why that happened. The opponent forfeits, and I thought that battle was just really great to show off Palossand and Scorching Sands. I do have another battle which demonstrates the rest of the set for Palossand, so I'll show you that to you now. Here, my opponent leads off with Rotom, as I lead with my Palossand, because I thought Palossand had a great matchup against the opponent's team. The only thing which might give it issues was Rotom, which isn't ideal. My opponent's going to opt to go straight for a Will-O-Wisp. I'm not sure whether that was predicting a switch out, because obviously water type versus a ground type isn't a great matchup for me, or whether it's just seeing a bulky Pokemon wanting to get some residual damage on it. That's fair enough. But I have the Amnesia, which is really great because it allows me to shore up, no pun intended, my special defense. My physical defense is already great. Now the Rotom's going to go for some Dark Pulses, maybe gauging damage. It's actually really not doing too much, but it does have that scary 20% flinch chance, which I avoid this turn and get another Amnesia off. But it's still kind of hairy because I need to get a shore up recovery off the next turn, and they're still going for those 20% flinch chances. Again, fortunately, they don't get it, and I get the shore up done. I think I would have survived another Dark Pulse anyway, so I probably would have had another chance. I think the odds were in my favour there, but that's really good. So now what I'm going to do is just go for another shore up, because I'm probably going to have to tank another attack. As the opponent goes for a Hydro Pump, they switch it up. You've already seen that I've got a Passo Berry on this Siltadel, which means that I can easily tank the Hydro Pump incoming, get that water compaction. So now I'm +4 special defense, +2 physical defense, and I've just gone for a shore up, which is going to make sure that I'm at max HP and can tank anything else that the Rotom wants to throw at me. So now I think I do just want to go for the last Amnesia in case the Rotom wants to Dynamax and go for some Max Geysers. The opponent's already had enough, and that is how you beat an opponent with a Palossand without even going for any damage. because it's just so threatening when you can get the passive defense boosts and also get the amnesia special defense boost. It's such a bulky Pokemon. Passo Berry works really well because it means that you can actually take on water types. With a Passo Berry, you get hit by one water type move, you get +2 defense, and any following physical water type moves are just going to boost your defense even further, and you can keep shoring up. So that's really nice on Palossand. Definitely watch out if you're facing one for the Passo Berry. So those were just some demonstrations of how a bulky Palossand set works and how Scorching Sands can really make the difference between actually being able to take on Pokemon you couldn't before, because you can get a burn to mitigate damage. So I thought that those were really cool. But now we're going to talk about the fun, gimmicky Palossand set, and this is going to be in doubles. So I think it's best if we just jump into a battle. This first battle is against the infamous Dragapult Colossal combination, where you Gigantamax Colossal and you get like the Steam Engine and the weakness policy all activated with Dragapult Surf. But you're going to see the combination that I'm leading with Axelgor and Palossand really putting in the work. It's a very fun combination that I think a few people are using at the moment, but you still really don't see very much because it doesn't have great matchups against a lot of the very common archetypes. I'm going to show you another battle after this where that's the case. But in this one, we've got a pretty good matchup, actually. So I'm going to Dynamax my Palossand. Obviously, Colossal is going to Gigantamax because that's part of their strategy, but I'm aware of that, so it means that I know that I can match that. Palossand's amazing Dynamax animation is so cool, where it becomes this blob of sand on the floor and rises into a terrifying spooky castle. Absolutely love that, iconic. So now what we're going to do is go straight for a Water Shuriken into our own Palossand. What this does is it activates our Water Compaction ability, and it activates our weakness policy, and because Water Shuriken hits multiple times, you can actually get multiple activations of your Water Compaction ability. So just there, I got +2 attack, +2 special attack, and +4 defense. If you're against physically attacking Pokemon, they will just not be able to do any damage at all to Palossand. I only get 2 hits there, but the opponent's going for a Surf, which means that they're activating their own Steam Engine and weakness policy, but they're also giving me the last Water Compaction boost I need to be at max defense, +6 defense, which is absolutely insane. Now the opponent's actually going to target into my Axelgor with a max Volcalith. I'm not sure if they didn't know which of my Pokemon would be the bigger threat, or maybe they just wanted to get the Volcalith set up so that I'd have residual damage on my team, because Volcalith is very, very useful to go for, and obviously attacking into Axelgor is preferable when you're using that move. But it means that I have an untouched ground type with +2 special attack against a 4 times weak Colossal, so I'm going to go for my Max Quake. And what's so nice about this combination is you get those defense boosts with the Water Compaction activation, but then you're going for Max Quakes, which gives you special defense boosts. So that means that Palossand becomes really hard to take down from both sides of the spectrum. It's still definitely a more physically bulky Pokemon, but with the EV spread that I'm using, it maximizes its special bulk too. Now I'm actually going to send out my Call Me By Your Name, my Torkoal, because even though we're not in Trick Room, my opponent will really be tempted to target into the Torkoal because it's such an offensive presence, and if they don't, Torkoal's going to get some big hits off. Palossand obviously is super bulky too, so they need to prioritize that, but because Palossand's so bulky, they double attack into it and just don't do any damage. I'm able to get off a massive hit on Dragapult, but yeah, even the Life Orb, Iron Fist boosted Ice Punch from Conkeldurr did very little damage to my Palossand, so my opponent's not looking in a great position here. I get another special defense boost after the Max Quake, and then can go for a Heat Wave for some spread damage to do a ton to Conkeldurr and take out the Dragapult too. So this combination is going pretty well. Even outside of Trick Room, my very slow Pokemon are putting on such pressure on the opponent. You can see the Volcalith is still doing work, but it's kind of a little too late, as the opponent sends in the Dusclops, and I guess realizing that they've brought a Trick Room setter to a really bad Trick Room matchup, they cancel the battle there, and Palossand saves the day. He did the thing. So that was really cool, but that was a match with a relatively good matchup for Palossand. I mean, they didn't necessarily have a ton of physical attackers. Its best matchup is certainly against Sand. If you get the Axelgor Palossand lead against an Excadrill Tyranitar, like, they can't do very much at all, and it's very fun. But in this next battle, I wanted to show you just a little bit of an adaptation because the opponent's actually leading with the very common Psychic Terrain archetype. So we can get into this battle. So my opponent's going to lead with Alakazam and Indeedee. And that's very common because obviously Indeedee can set up the Psychic Terrain, and then there's the Expanding Force move, which would hit both my Pokemon, and it's boosted in Psychic Terrain. It's terrifying. So I can actually use Water Shuriken here. The Psychic Terrain only blocks priority moves from the opponent into your Pokemon, or vice versa, but you can actually target your own Pokemon with priority moves still. So what I'm going to do is Dynamax my Palossand. I think it's kind of necessary for it to be able to survive the hit. We get that amazing animation again. I just love that every time. And then what we're going to do is actually use some of Axelgor's support moves. So we're going to go for a Struggle Bug here, which is fantastic because it can hit both opponents. If the Indeedee was going to go for a Follow Me, it would mitigate that because obviously it would hit both, and it drops both their special attack, which is going to be very, very helpful. Now, the opponent's going to go for 2 Expanding Forces. I wasn't sure if they were going to go for a Follow Me and an Expanding Force, or maybe a Helping Hand, but 2 Expanding Forces makes sense if they were going to try to target into the Axelgor. I'm going to go for a relatively risky Max Phantasm here, because if they had gone for Follow Me in the Indeedee, it would have not worked at all, but I really did think that Expanding Force was coming from both opponents. I didn't go for the Max Quake. That would have been nice if it was assured to KO on the Alakazam, but I wasn't convinced, but the special defense boost would have definitely been helpful. Now I max guard because I'm thinking a Dynamax and Grass type move might be coming out from the Venusaur, but it just protects, which is really frustrating. I do manage to get another Struggle Bug special attack drop on the Indeedee, which can be very helpful, but it meant that I could have just attacked with my Palossand here, maybe got a special defense boost with a Max Quake. That would have been really nice, but I just didn't call that protect on the Venusaur. It was putting on a lot of pressure, and the opponent definitely had the upper hand that turn. Now things aren't looking too good for me because they've still got 3 Pokemon. I've still got 3 Pokemon, but they've got a lot of momentum in their favor as their Venusaur is looking very scary. They actually switch out their Indeedee. I mean, after 2 special attacks, that special attack drops, that does make sense. And they switch into Torkoal, which is a very nice move, because what I'm going for here is Trick Room with my Porygon 2, and they obviously think they can cover for that by switching into their Torkoal and then trying to take out my Palossand with the Venusaur. Interestingly, they're not Gigantamax Venusaur. Like, we're not having any Gigantamaxes in this video, apparently not. That's fine. I think Terrain Wars are really one of the main reasons why that's happening. Here you see a Terrain archetype, but having Terrain control is really important at the moment because of all the new Terrain-based moves that were introduced. My Palossand does go down. Maybe if I got a Max Quake off somewhere along the way, it would have survived that. It doesn't though, and that's unfortunate, but I am going to be able to get the Trick Room off. Now, what I think is kind of interesting is that the opponent, obviously they brought in their Torkoal because they thought Trick Room's going up, this will be great positioning for me. But I've got my own Call Me By Your Name Torkoal, and they've seen that I'm a Trick Room team, and it turns out that my Torkoal is slower than their Torkoal, so I'm going to get an Eruption off first. And this is going to be really great for me. I would have prioritized maybe stopping me from getting Trick Room if their Torkoal wasn't min speed, but that's not what they did. Fortunately, I'm able to get some damage on the opposing Torkoal before it can go for an Eruption, so it's slightly weakened. Porygon takes a little bit less damage, and so does my own Torkoal too. The Venusaur went for a Max Guard, which makes sense because they were probably wanting to get damage on my Torkoal before their Venusaur took an Eruption. But what I can do now is just go for another Eruption. The Venusaur can't guard this turn. It doesn't quite take it out, but I'm going to make the same play as I made in the previous turn. It turns out to be a weakness policy Venusaur, which I think is interesting. I haven't really seen that too much. The opposing Torkoal has Burning Jealousy, which is cool. It hits both of my Pokemon. But I try attacking the Venusaur, so I can take that out, which is really my priority at this stage, because Venusaur was quite a big threat, especially seeing as though it was the Dynamax Pokemon. I wanted to stop it attacking that turn. Burning Jealousy is an interesting tech on Torkoal. I think that the burn chance is cool, but Torkoal is more of an offensive Pokemon, and Burning Jealousy's power is much less of that than some of its other spread moves, so I'm not sure if I would run that myself. So yeah, it's an interesting choice though, and a good option if you don't want to miss. So anyway, Indeedee comes back in. I'm going to go for a Heat Wave, and you see here that I do miss my Heat Wave on the Torkoal, so Burning Jealousy may have been superior here, although actually I don't think so, because the Indeedee's taken down to quite low HP, and I'm able to pick it off with a tri-attack, and I think with Burning Jealousy probably wouldn't have put it in tri-attack range, so that's why Heat Wave is still seen quite a lot, because Burning Jealousy is a lot weaker. Having taken out their Indeedee, my opponent forfeits there, so that had to be an adaptation. You saw that I couldn't go for the usual strategy of Water Shuriken into my own Palossand, because getting defense boosts wasn't going to help me too much. I could take out the Alakazam without the weakness policy activation. And really the priority for Axelgor was getting the special attack drops on the opponent, maybe breaking some sashes, and that's what it does. I do want to note that I think that on these sets, Earth Power is better than Scorching Sands, because this is an offensive Palossand. You get an extra 10 base power on its max Quake if you use Earth Power, and Earth Power itself is base 90 power compared to 70 for Scorching Sands, which is significant. So I do think that on these offensive sets, Earth Power is better. But I hope you enjoyed these strategies. Let me know how you like to use Scorching Sands in the comment section below. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to the channel for more. All that's left to be said is I've been Foo, you've been awesome, and hopefully see you next time. Goodbye.